Welcome to the only podcast that qualifies as a pre-existing condition. This is the Illest podcast.
We are back. Hello.
Hello, everyone. Did you miss us? Probably not, but that's okay. We're back anyways.
I missed us.
I missed me.
Yeah. Where were you avoiding yourself?
Listen, hey, multiple personality disorder, it's not always a bad thing. It's fun. I like it. I get to miss myself. I get to experience myself in multiple ways. I highly recommend it. If you don't already have a disorder, check out multiple personality disorder. It's a riot.
So, we're not actually alone right now.
No, obviously, I just talked about my multiple personality disorder.
Yes.
There's at least 7 of me sitting right here.
So, yes, this is a 9-person podcast.
Exactly.
There's me, Key. There's the 7 Aydans, and we have our first non-imaginary guest.
Our first non-imaginary guest.
Hi, everybody. My name is Jeff Cooper.
And I don't know if we let you know this last week, but we are going to have guests every week. And I'm really excited about having Jeff here. Thank you for coming, Jeff.
Oh, thank you. You're very
welcome. It's not easy finding people who are willing to talk about everything that's wrong with their life. So,
yeah. I feel like there's it's hard to move past the stigmas that are involved with any sort of disease or malady, and I think that
A little bit closer.
And I think that the talking about it is one of the most important things that we can do.
I just meant people in Humboldt County are flaky, but that works too.
Yeah, no, that's true too.
So, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? Anything that you're comfortable with, but only if it's interesting. Thanks.
Okay, I have nothing to share in that case.
Awesome. Let's move on.
Okay, what makes you boring then? What makes you boring?
I'm an avid tabletopper, and
I knew you were going to say that. I knew it was like as soon as what makes you boring. I was like, he's going to talk about his tabletop games.
Yeah, I was building a popsicle stick house that I'll be using as a haunted mansion in the monster hunting game that I'm throwing.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah, I'm excited about it.
So I'm not offended that you have never invited me. Just if you were wondering, it's okay. I'm fine.
That's good.
So is Susan, my other personality. She's fine too.
Well, actually, Susan is invited.
Yeah.
Sorry.
That's rude. She's unavailable.
She's just a better role player.
Yeah.
And you need to...
I'm just saying, Susan will play a healer. Nobody else will play a healer. That's important.
I always play a healer. I'm a main healer. Absolutely.
I've also my name's Key Harder. I think I forgot to say that
Yeah, we
because
didn't
I am
introduce
so
ourselves.
unprofessional.
Yeah, my
But
name is Aydan.
And welcome to the Illest podcast, the first D&D podcast about
Yeah.
chronic illness,
Just
apparently.
kidding. Yeah.
Roll for initiative.
Yeah. We're role playing about chronic illness.
That's
Yeah.
wonderful.
Roll.
Yeah.
I'll have the one with multiple personalities.
Yeah, there's a
No, that
sounds
one's
more
taken.
fun.
Yeah,
Okay.
there's a
I'm already
percentile you roll on for pre-existing conditions, and
Yeah.
it's
It's like a wizard, but less complicated.
Thing is depending on what state you live in when you roll that die, it always comes out at 0.
Oh, yeah. Also, depending on what state you roll that die in, you probably are not going to have any kind of help or assistance or anything. But that's not what we're here to talk about because this is supposed to be funny.
yeah. This is
This is not a serious podcast. No. As you can tell by our wonderful introductions of ourselves.
I mean, I tend to try to take myself incredibly seriously. It's just bad because I constantly am failing at things, so it just
Yeah.
compounds that.
I know. It really
Yeah.
makes for, that's why I have so many different personalities. I can just, talk to Susan. She's great.
She's always willing to listen.
She's always willing to listen. Yeah, exactly. Okay. First of all, one thing we did that's important to me that we didn't do is obviously we introduced your name, but we didn't ask what pronouns that you go by or if there's a different name that you like to go by. So if you could say that for us, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, no, I'm an incredibly boring cisgendered white man. So I go by the he and the him and the his and all that jazz.
Well, yeah, see, look, first podcast, we had to scrape the bottom of the barrel.
Yeah,
people.
I'm sorry, guys.
Yeah.
I did what I could.
No, actually, you're a very good friend of both of us, and we're like really thankful and awesome. I'm very excited to have you here. I think it's gonna be awesome.
That's very kind. That's very kind. I appreciate that a lot. And it was actually, when I heard that you guys were doing this, I thought that it was something that sort of fills a hole that we don't have. Like, it's...
There's
like
a joke there.
Interpret that as you will. But that it is one of the most difficult things for people to sort of talk about what makes them vulnerable, and especially in a culture where we like big touchdown wins.
Yeah.
It's really hard for people to talk about the things that make them vulnerable, and disease is the number one thing that I think we interpret as what makes us vulnerable. So I thought this was a really cool idea when you guys brought it up.
Yay! That's good.
Vindication.
Yeah, exactly. So far, we're doing great. Our first guest actually likes our show.
It's gonna be weird when we get people on just to shit talk the show.
Yeah.
Be like,
I only came on here because I want to tell you how terrible and offensive this is.
Right,
Yeah.
I faked having a disease just to get here to give you a piece of my
Yeah,
mind.
exactly. Listen, my grandmother's second cousin had this, and I don't like how you talk about it. Actually, I would love a guest like that because I like my actual other personality, my drag personality would come out, and they would just be. They didn't have a chronic illness before they did that. They would after they left.
That would be.
I've
I
again.
tell ya.
Like last time, should have shaved my head so I could then just pull off the wig
Yeah.
again, like always.
That is a trope that I am going to run into the ground on this podcast. Just whoosh, pull off the wig.
Welcome to Inside Joke Theater.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. Oh, that was I laughed about that for weeks after.
Yeah, we had to.
And I
We
think
had
I made
to.
it.
I had to do some editing in the podcast because it was literally just a week of laughter.
Yeah,
Like people were
exactly.
coming in and out to do shows. It was awkward, and
It was
then
so awkward.
Then we
I
finished
just
it
rolled
up.
around up here and just laughed and laughed. Told every person that walked in the door the jokes. I thought it was so funny. Yeah, I'm surprised they let me back in. Anyways, maybe we should talk about, I don't know.
We
our
should
guest
clarify,
with
like
chronic
you
illness. Yeah.
do have a disability,
Yes,
right? You're
yeah,
not here
sorry.
to.
Yeah, absolutely. I
You do have a disability, and it's not that you're just a cis white man.
That's exactly it. That is
not the chronic illness.
Perhaps
Although it
one of the
is
hardest things.
Sometimes a chronic illness. It's not yours.
The victimization is real. No, but really. So I have two things. I have two interesting things about me, and only two. The first is that fairly recently in my life, I was diagnosed with ulcerative proctitis, which is a form of ulcerative colitis. And if you were to do a flow chart of gut diseases, you would have Crohn's being the very worst, and then you'd have ulcerative proctitis / colitis being sort of the second.
Really?
And then it goes down to IBS.
I did not know that, actually.
Yeah.
I did not. I've heard of that before, but I did not know it was actually that severe.
Yeah, it's so, and also on top of that, I was told by my GI doctor when I was diagnosed that even because he said there was some question about what exactly it could be, which of those three things. He said even if it is IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, that.
Thank you for clarifying.
Yeah, no problem. That IBS and gut-related maladies are the number one cause of missed work across the world. And right now,
Wow.
China is going through a huge boom. Not a boom, but they're going through like it's a big deal over in China right now. And he thinks it has to do with the stress being very related to your gut.
Absolutely. I have so much to say about this.
Yeah, so that over in China, there's giant spikes in cases of ulcerative colitis, and so a lot of the best research that we're having right now in the world of gastrointestinal disorders is coming out of China because of that, which I thought was pretty cool.
That is actually really interesting. I don't mean to. I just keep talking and poor Keys over here.
You're good. Like
Yeah,
you,
he's just enjoying the podcast.
you do your thing before I completely ruin it with my bad jokes. Like I've thought of a few terrible. You know
guys,
what?
have
I'm
you
going
heard
to
this
interject them. I'm going to interject now so you can get onto your serious thing.
Awesome, I don't feel so bad.
I'm just wondering, like, how you feel about your general intuition about things currently. Like, just as a person, do you feel like you're very intuitive? You're able to just like pick up on things very well.
Well, yeah.
Because I really don't think you should be able to trust your gut at this point.
Oh my God.
There it was.
Oh,
I apologize for nothing.
Yeah, exactly. And that is the end of this podcast.
Goodbye, everybody. It's been a great night.
I do not feel bad about talking a lot anymore.
Yeah.
Actually.
You should keep me quiet. It's going to be best for everyone involved.
I was wondering where you were going with that.
That was.
I was like, I don't understand the question. This isn't on the list. What are you talking about?
And I don't want to derail things, but my mom's a psychic, so that's a very particular question
Yeah.
to ask. Well, are we going there?
Yeah.
Like,
This is going to be a completely different podcast, let me tell you. No, so one of the autoimmune diseases that I deal with is celiac disease, which is one of, which I feel like, in my experience, is one of like the least validated autoimmune diseases, as well as one of, it's incredibly common, and not necessarily specifically celiacs, but autoimmune diseases that involve like your gut health is very common. So much more common than I realized. And one of the things that I found out when I talked to my therapist was that you have, this is an incredibly interesting fact, I think. You have more serotonin receptors in your gut than you do in your brain.
yes.
Yep.
So, like, people are just like, it doesn't matter what I eat. And it's like, no, like, literally, like, that is, and also your immune system is connected directly to, like, your gut health. Like, it's all connected. Literally, everything you put in your body is connected to everything else.
Yeah,
I didn't
absolutely.
realize how intensely, though, also.
I mean, the gut, like the ability to digest is like the first real like organ that ever was a thing.
Yeah,
That's like the basic function of life is to go take
Consume,
things
and-
in and then make more cells.
Yeah.
It's also the first. It's also the first function in your body. I know this from experience. The first function in your body that stops functioning when your body's preparing to die.
And that's when Aydan went to Vegas. That was a good night.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, it was that, and then the liver, and then just all of the other ones. I don't even know. It was great. It was totally worth it.
I don't know.
That's where I met Susan. Vegas.
I don't know if we can talk about like other companies or anything like that.
We can. I shit talked like a few
That's right, you
businesses
totally did.
last
Yeah,
time.
Absolutely. Okay. Yeah.
I am just going and alienating all parts of our community while talking about how incredibly great and supportive they are
Yeah.
and how they should support
Except
us.
for this one and this one.
Right.
Yeah.
These two companies never.
Yeah.
Well, that's good because I'm gonna talk about a comic thing on Facebook. You have the Awkward Yeti comic panel going on in a really crazy fucking way. As far as you were saying, your gut shuts down first, then your liver.
Oh, yeah,
And I'm
yes,
just
yes,
seeing
yes.
those fat where they
Yeah.
anthropomorphize the body parts.
Yes,
Yeah. They're
yes,
just like,
yes.
fuck you. I'm gonna go do coke or something. I'm out, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. Speaking of like awkward, the like just, nice segue.
Thank you.
All things that involve like the gut health or like your gut health or things like celiacs or anything like that. Of all, I feel like so many autoimmune diseases, that is one of the most uncomfortable to talk about, even though it is literally like at the center of so much health, and not just at the center of so much health. I have to talk with my hands, obviously, but also your mental health. Everything else affects it as it affects everything else.
For those of you listening, because this is an audio only thing, just imagine a pair of hands just flailing wildly.
Flailing wildly. Yes, it is impossible for me to make a point without moving my hands as I am pounding this table.
I empathize and also. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I think I actually like part of the reason, though, unfortunately, like lots of gut trouble and stuff is not really talked about is like, well, it also has like a lot of the side effects have to do with like straight up like pooping, and
Yes,
people
I was gonna
associate it with pooping. Like that's just straight. Like
Listen, I
things
love to
like
talk shit, but I don't like to talk about shit.
like ooh,
Yeah.
So, but
1-1.
yeah, but one,
One for
but
you, one for
like when I talk about stuff like cancer, like people kind of like they can picture it as like a tragic thing, but because they don't have to go and think about all of the chemo shits I had, because that's not something that's just like out there. But when it
something to
has
talk
to do,
about,
I just did.
Yeah, well,
I mean, I just did.
Well, see, so if I
The
may,
general
the thing that I think is one of this, like, I don't mean this in the way that it's going to sound, but cancer is Cancer is
Sorry, that was
way
me.
sexier than gut issues.
Oh,
Damn
yeah.
right it is.
It's right. I mean, I'm heated sitting here next to you.
Yeah, we talked about sympathy sex last time.
Right.
Yeah,
You ain't getting
absolutely.
none of that with a gut
Nope.
issue. But
And I'm not even going to talk about gay men, okay? I'm not even going to go there, okay? Our next, I could talk all day about the struggles of being a gay man and being particularly tending to lean towards more the bottom.
Sure.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
then having terrible gut issues. I don't have any horror stories, to be perfectly honest.
I was going to say this sounds like the lead up to a risk.
No, I
podcast
don't honestly have
episode.
any horror stories on, no pun intended, on my end. But,
Hey.
yeah, that wasn't even intentional. 2 for me, 1 for you. But it really is a big. I remember when I first, I found out I had celiac like a year before I actually finally came out as a gay man, and I remember specifically a conversation with my friends where I was like, "This absolutely sucks," because, that is a huge part of my sex life, and now, and the thing is that of course, when you think of bottoming, and there's all those jokes out there, don't eat Chipotle before you, have sex, which if you're, not a gay person, that may not make sense, but you can probably put 2 and 2 together. It's painful and not painful. Anyways, this is a comedy podcast. I'm literally just mentally going through all the jokes I can make, but it's like painful, like excruciating, like using your arm when you just had surgery. Like it's painful.
Yes.
Yes.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And it's, again, one of those things, people don't talk about that.
Uh-huh.
They're not going to talk about that.
Yeah.
You involve talking about your sex life and also your, your bathroom habits in one conversation. No one wants to hear about that.
Absolutely. And I mean, on that, so we're talking about how the gut issues don't get a lot of time in the limelight.
Yeah.
People ask you like, oh, well, what's your problem? Because I say I've got this disease, and they ask, so what are the symptoms? And they're interested in the conversation right up until the point that I say, yeah, I'm going to the bathroom, X amount of times a day. They're not interested in the insane amount of pain that I'm experiencing while I'm on the toilet.
And as soon as you say like, oh yeah, it causes, what, fill in the blanks, this,
all
of these
sorts
other-
of not
all
family-friendly
sorts of,
terms.
they
Yeah.
immediately are like, oh, that sounds terrible. So what are you doing tomorrow?
Right.
And you
Let's talk about anything
change the
else.
subject immediately. And you're like, no, but this is a really big part of my life, and it really is incredibly painful. And the only time you ever see anything mentioned about it is when, it's some kind of like new medication online, and I mean on TV, and they're like, is your blah 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 affecting your life? About you can't be too far away from a bathroom, and then those just end up being made fun of. Obviously, I make fun of them all the time, but it's a real thing.
Yes.
It's really challenging, and
Absolutely.
it affects so many more people than anybody realizes, I think.
I mean, so I'm on disability now. The job that I worked before that, I worked at Pacific Powder Company in Arcata, South G Street. If you need anything powder coated ever, go there. They're really awesome. Ken and Patty, great people.
Or if you need comedy, come to Savage Henry Comedy Club on 5th Street.
Also, if this podcast needs supporting, you can talk to. No, I'm not going to.
We'll get to that later.
Yeah, we have a break for
that job, it's a factor. It's a line job. You are standing and working, and I, while very recently diagnosed with this disease. When I was prompted by my doctor to sort of go back to when these symptoms began, this goes back 20 years. It is likely that I have had ulcerative proctitis since I was about 9 years old.
Yeah.
So let alone, I mean, we could get into how I've never really been at full working capacity a day in my life, but that just the job of being an upright, able-bodied individual who can stand and do reasonable, it's not even strenuous, it's reasonable work. And then it's like, I can't stand because I'm sweating so much because of my gut issues, or I've got to go to the bathroom because of my gut issues.
Totally.
Or I don't have to go to the bathroom, but the cramping in my lower
intense pain.
Insane. I mean, I like to, one of my things is that I've been to the emergency room more times than my family combined. I come from a family of 6. I'm well, I've been in pain. My gut issues take it's the 10 out of 10. I've never had more pain than my gut issues.
Yeah.
And one thing that you kind of is like even though you were like disabled for the last 20 years in some capacity or another, like you can be disabled and still be technically able to work. Like I work.
You cannot be validated in your disability because of.
I work in a bank, in a credit union at CoCentral. It's a really great job, and they've been really accommodating. But there are some days where just the act of standing to go and take money in, put money out, like it's not a physically demanding job. It's a intellectually demanding one, but I'm able to do that. But it's not physically demanding. But there are some times where my hip I will slightly bend in a certain direction that is not even a stretch. And then I know that for the next 2 days, I'm going to be in pain. Right now, I took like 2 Advils immediately before coming to record this podcast because I was having some spinal issues. Yeah. And that's the thing where like, it's weird that we kind of classify people as able to work and not able to work when it's like, well,
it's a spectrum just like everything else.
I could do work comfortably for X hours a week, but above that, it's going to start causing problems, and there's not really enough space for those gray areas.
There isn't, and there's not. Especially, I've talked about this with so many people. I was self-employed for 15 years as a hairstylist, and even being self-employed, we're like, oh, you can set your own hours, so you can adapt to all these different things. It's like, being self-employed, I had to work twice as hard to afford, and the cost of living in this area is completely 100% on the not balanced with wages and things.
It's completely out of ratio with
like
what you
when
make.
So I did hair for 15 years, and when I started, haircuts were 13, and then when I had to stop, they were 25. And if you factor, like if you start thinking about the percentage of that increase, and then compare it to the increase of food, housing, and just everything else, it's like a third at best of the increase of inflation,
Right. I mean, how many of those $25 haircuts, and it's easy math, but do you have to do to afford your $500 rent for a single room, no utilities included?
Yeah, a closet, and it's extra for the door,
Right. Let's not talk about everything, everything else that you're paying for on top of that. It's crazy. It's totally fucking crazy around here.
Well, and one thing I wanted to mention too that a lot of people don't, when you talk about anything that involves gut issues at all, anything, first of all, no one knows that it affects your immune system. No one knows that those are so closely intertwined. And 2, for celiacs, there is you can potentially have any number or combination of 300 plus symptoms. Not all of them, like no one has all 300, but any one or multiple of those 300 symptoms you can have.
I believe in you. I think you can get there. If you try and you work towards it, you'll be able to be the first.
I've got a checklist. I'm like going off down the
treating symptoms
down.
Yeah. Let's go.
Exactly. So, and I say that because it is nearly impossible to diagnose.
Right.
Even the only tests they have are non-conclusive.
Absolutely.
And so that's another thing that a lot of people don't realize is that it's very difficult to diagnose. You almost and it's not just like it's like, oh cool, you have celiac, so that just you have to go to the bathroom more often, or and it's like no, like when I get exposed to gluten, it's like 4 to 6 weeks of symptoms, and they're incredibly extreme, and they affect my mood and my blood sugar and all kinds of other stuff that have nothing to do with that.
So, I feel like we interrupted you a little bit when you were talking about work, but then again, that's kind of the nature of this beast.
Conversate. But I don't really remember what I was saying.
Well, in which case, so when it deals with ulcerative proctitis, I didn't say that word out loud before the podcast started, and I'm just realizing.
Welcome to the real hell of having ulcerative proctitis.
So actually, what question, like, when you talk about disability, lots of times people have questions, and what question do you keep on getting that you are fucking sick of people asking you? Like, what is the most annoying thing that everyone goes up and just fucking bugs you about?
I think it's too... All right, I have my answer for this doesn't have a lot to do with ulcerative proctitis, and we touched on this a tiny bit before we hit the record button. I have had my diagnosis for such a short amount of time that, and it's not like also it keeps me from working, but it is not something that you see affecting me almost at all. So and it doesn't, like, yes, untreated, the symptoms of ulcerative proctitis, as stated by my GI doctor, lead to cancer 10 out of 10 times. And I've had the thing for 20 years. So those are like scary stats.
Yeah.
But I've had my tests, so I'm clear on that. I know I'm fine on that. So it's like the ulcerative proctitis is just, it's frankly not medically alarming enough for me to get exhaustive amounts of questions. However, I said there were two things that make me an interesting person.
This is going to be my transition after this is going to be into this. So let's.
So the other thing is that 2006, I had a severe head injury, and while concussions and severe head injuries are technically the same thing, to get the symptoms that you get out of a severe head injury, you have to go far past concussion symptoms. So I was riding my bike at night with no helmet on.
Smart.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I don't remember any of it. I woke up the next morning with a cast on my arm with a note next to me that said everything's okay, because I kept waking up in the middle of the night and asking questions. But but apparently what happened is someone pulled out in front of me in their car, and I was on a bike. I used to live on a big old hill. If you bike a lot and you bike down hills a lot, you know that your brakes don't wear evenly, because you usually use your back
brake because you don't want to flip over the front of your bike.
So when you're in an emergency and you reactively grab both brakes, your front one engages first, and you fly over your handlebars. And that is apparently what happened to me. I was conscious enough to report all of that to my girlfriend at the time, and I come into the house just streaming curses. I told her that I had passed out. I will never know for how long I was unconscious on the street. Passed out, got myself in. I was like across the street from where I lived. Yeah.
I don't know why that feels like it makes it worse, but it always feels so much worse when you're right next to
there. I mean, the place I was biking was 3 minutes away. It was. I was on. It was going from one end of the block to the other end of the block. It was just wrong place, wrong time.
Oh wow.
So anyhow.
What I find interesting about this is like the first time we're getting both a first and third hand account of the same thing from the same person.
Exactly.
Like, I don't know if this is like, it kind of is a first hand account because you're talking about yourself. You're like, I heard this rumor about me.
As I have been told, and that's exactly it.
Yeah.
My memory stops at walking up and down the aisles of the Pink Mart on Samoa in Arcata. And then my memory kicks back in the next morning when I have a cast on my arm.
That's just that in and of itself is
crazy.
Uneasy, like would make me uneasy.
Yeah. I mean, I always, like, when I was a kid, I was afraid of two things: quicksand, because it was everywhere.
Yeah,
absolutely.
But then the other one was amnesia. Amnesia is one of the scariest. It's the oldest plot thing, but it's the scariest one to me.
Oh yeah, that is like my biggest fear. Like, growing up in a household that there was mental illness is like one of my biggest fears still to this day is if/when I go crazy. And I know that that's a bad term that we are going to be trying to dissuade from using, but since we're talking about experience, totally. Onto myself, that's something that I'm like, that's also part of the reason why I don't do any like hard drugs, is because I'm like, I need to be in control of my mind. And no, that is conceptually horrifying, being whoa, so my brain turned off?
Right.
It's not.
Right. My whole memory-making factory just stopped working,
but everything else kept going.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yes.
The first time I can count on one hand how many, not that it matters, but the first time I remember getting so drunk where I blacked out, obviously I don't remember, that's, the first time, the second time I got really, really, really drunk, and as soon as I realized that I was going to black out and there was going to be a period of time that I wasn't in control, I immediately just started sobbing because I hate that feeling. Yes. It is the worst feeling to know that you are continuing to do things but you won't remember any of it.
Yes.
I hate it so much.
And just the idea, I mean, like, let's do a little thought exercise right here and now, and then I'll get to the answer of the question that I hate the most. So I've not forgotten it, though I've forgotten many things. Let's imagine right now that we're having this experience we are all experiencing sitting at a table with microphones in front of us.
Yes.
Think about right now if you will never remember this moment ever again.
That's actually a really
I'll
strong
just listen to the
possibility
podcast later.
Yeah.
Well, that's convenient, right?
Yeah.
That's the kind of creepy that it is.
It's
Because it's
so
the idea that
weird.
you're walking, living, breathing, and you're experiencing life. You would think that for all reasons that you could imagine, you'd be recording these memories.
Yeah.
But it just might not be there
The
tomorrow
concept
morning.
that like you are, like you said, existing and living life, but yet you will never ever know what you were.
That's probably like the worst thing. And when I was going through chemo and all of that, and lots of the medications I was on, including steroids and other things, like when I moved into my new house, apparently, I don't know if you guys know who Monkey is. Monkey, if you're
I love
listening,
Monkey.
yeah, you're
Monkey,
a cool,
you're a wonderful
you're
person.
a
I
cool
love you.
person. I am sorry that there has been like 3 or 4 occasions where I said, "Hello, Monkey, welcome to my house" for the first time.
Nice.
Like trying to be a really proper
You
guest.
awful person. How could you do that? to
Because I
Monkey?
just
I've never had Monkey over, so I have no place to speak. But I love it.
maybe you did too. Maybe
Maybe you
I
did.
I don't remember.
That's
After
what
this
that's what
conversation,
I
I'm
would have
starting to wonder
said.
What I've done, yeah. I have
That's
no
what
idea.
I would have said in
Concussion, I don't
July
know
of
what to
last
tell you.
year.
They come and they go. You know.
One of the. So
But
one
no,
of the,
that is something that's like really weird because when you have any type of memory problems and you have this confidence in your own self because the only thing you really have experience on in reality is this subjective thing.
Yes.
And so having non-confidence in what reality is.
Oh,
Yeah. Yes.
That-
Absolutely.
that is. Yeah, that's just making me uncomfortable.
Yeah, right. I could speak a lot about that topic. So very quickly, just to answer the question.
Yeah.
The question that I couldn't stand is because you can't describe what it feels like when you have a concussion. You're trying to describe how your brain feels, and you don't even have access to the neurons that have the words that tell you how things feel when your concussion is severe enough.
Yep.
So I couldn't stand it when people would. I'd say I'm feeling shitty or whatever. They say, "Oh, are you feeling all right? Like, are you okay?" That's the one that would constantly come back because there was no way for them. It's like when someone dies in your family and people say, "I'm sorry."
Yeah.
I don't care that you're sorry.
Yeah,
I'm
I
sorry
know.
too, Susan.
Yeah.
You know. So it was that sort of same thing. It was
Listen,
like this-
Susan's offended.
Yeah, well, she wouldn't stop asking. But that was the thing is because I couldn't find the words, people thought they would be helpful by asking like, "Well, are you okay?" It's like I don't even know if I'm okay.
No,
Yeah.
I
Those
don't know
words
if I'm
exist
okay.
for
Yeah.
me, So
Yep.
that was the one that I couldn't stand.
The follow up was going to be me just asking that question back of like how does it feel, but you already answered that, which is nice. Though I also that's another thing, like grief does affect you in the same kind of ways. Not to go put your personal life on, but we've both lost siblings, and that's something that is so impossible for like years after. And when I finally became older than my oldest brother, that was.
Holy shit, Key.
Yeah, no, that was
Wow.
that. Yeah, no, it's one of those things where also like in so many things, people in grief and diagnosis, they'll say these things that you try your best to appreciate, but you can't
The
in
fucking
some ways.
platitudes.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh God.
Like I ranted like last time about how I'm not a brave, strong warrior who fights through cancer. I'm some like 20-some-year-old who's overwhelmed by everything in life already, and then this happens, and I just kind of like watched Hulu through cancer. That was my.
You bravely watched Hulu
Yeah.
through Cancer, Key.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh God. Yeah.
I'm sure you have some experiences on that as well.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah. Especially, it certainly doesn't help that I just basically hate people in general. So. Yeah. Totally. Yeah. Absolutely. It's so frustrating. I was gonna say earlier that one of my personal favorite podcasts is Not Too Deep by Grace Helbig. I don't know if you've heard either one of you heard
No.
that.
Yeah.
And it's literally a podcast that they don't talk about deep issues at all. She interviews celebrities and stuff. And so when you were talking about like the grief and stuff, and I was getting ready to be like, we need a safe word where it's like this is a comedy podcast. We need to like have a safe word where it's like too deep, that's too deep. Let's move on.
Watermelon.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But I mean, it doesn't matter. I was just kidding because it
No, because that's an interesting thing. Like when we came up with this show, it's a comedy podcast about some fucked up shit.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely.
Like
Yeah, exactly. We're gonna make jokes about things.
we're gonna
that
have
people
you
don't
laugh
talk
until
about.
you cry, then
Yeah,
cry until you laugh.
Yeah.
That's oh man, that is the like bone marrow transplant of like 11% white bitch that I got that just put it, which also I do realize like sometimes I make these jokes, like it actually was kind of weirdly validating, and I want to bring this out this time, like that I've never. Okay, yeah, this is getting like really weird and personal, but in order
Yeah,
to
I
like
know. I'm
portray
I know
that,
where this is going,
in
and
order to
I'm
portray
here
that
for
I'm
it.
not like making these just jokes about, hey, so like I'm kind of a lady now, but I'm actually like I've always sort of felt like. I always joke that I was like 10% female because like gender isn't necessarily a thing, but it's like it's like finding a decently fitting shirt at like Target or something where you're like, this isn't tailored perfectly to me, but it works pretty well and it feels comfortably, and I wouldn't end up going and buying a different size because that wouldn't fit better. So I'm like cis straight is like they're labels that fit me close enough that through my like day to day. So it also like it does kind of feel validating when I make these like jokes of being like I'm 11% female, because part of me is like, yeah, I am.
Because you're actually expressing something that you feel is true.
I feel is true,
Like on a
but
level besides the bone marrow thing.
but because I have this bone marrow thing and I have like some science, like it's a like I just felt like putting this out there so that I don't end up getting people to be like, hey, you're talking about some experiences that are invalidating to me, and I want to know that one, I do recognize that, and I do try to watch what I say, because being someone who is 90-some% straight, 90-some% cis, like.
That's funny.
Like, well, no, like
I
it's
love it. No, I love
that's
it.
fair. Like it's one of those things where it's
I
like
just checked back in at that point. I had zoned out like
rightfully
10
so.
minutes.
Rightfully
Yeah,
so.
and then I
Whenever
was like,
I'm
90%
talking,
straight. Haha, that's funny.
whenever I'm talking, Aydan's just doodling.
Yeah, I'm like
Playing hangman with herself? What's going on?
listening. Nothing
Multiple
personal,
personalities.
except listening to two cis straight men talk about how they feel about gender. I'm like, I'm not.
Okay,
listening.
that's
Aydan, I have two whole gay brothers. So
Yeah.
I
I could make that joke. I have a gay
yeah,
brother.
right.
I have two of them.
To the point that I don't even like to say it. Like, I don't even like to bring it up. But I
so
have
funny.
now, and you all know.
It's valid.
isn't it weird being the white sheep of your family?
Oh my fucking god! It's so I have been asked by my mom has come up to me and put her hand on my shoulder and said, "Honey, you know it's okay if you're not straight, right?"
You've seen how I've reacted.
Oh, that's funny.
Like,
I
you're not
appreciate
going to
it,
be.
Mom, I'm pretty sure. I
Yeah.
don't mean to disappoint. You know, I don't
As
mean.
confident as they are in theirs, I'm pretty confident in mine. Thanks.
I'm
funny.
blessed for the perspective it's granted me, and really, it just helps me realize that I can't understand anybody else's process, no matter how close I am to them.
Though,
Oh my God, we could do an entire week-long podcast on that principle alone.
Fuck yeah, that's a
One
life
of the most
thing.
frustrating things is people trying to relate to me.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
I hate that. First of all, I can guarantee you for multiple reasons you can't relate to me on anything. Second of all, every person's experience is different, which is why we started this podcast.
well, also just because you don't like when people go up to you and say anything, whether it's like
don't.
I relate to you or just hello or like,
Yeah.
hey, do you know where X is? Like you just all
Yeah,
of those are bad.
exactly. Like, how's your day going? Are you feeling well? Get out of my house. I hate all of those. You know.
Come on. Those aren't your dishes.
Like I'm on my way out. It's just your TV is big and
Yeah.
clunky. Like
Please
it's
put my stuff back. You know.
though.
I'm calling the police. I hate people. God.
Though one interesting, I guess a third interesting thing about you, Jeff, is that there's two interesting things about you.
I guess that's true.
It's just a weird roundabout way of saying, like, lots of times when we talk about illness, it's like, this is the person and this is what they have.
Yes,
Like, it is like, in media, you're only allowed to have one thing or all of the things in a comical fashion, usually with like a bumbly character anyways. Like, you see, like, in sitcoms, like, you'll have like your characters, like your Hitchcocks in Brooklyn Nine-Nine, Jerry's, like, you will have characters that have like everything wrong with him, or you have one thing wrong with you, and that is like a third of your personality.
Right.
And
And
those characters that everything wrong with them are usually labeled as hypochondriacs, and they're like the butt of all the jokes. And then, which just in my opinion, invalidates a lot of people who have chronic illness.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I mean, I'm sorry, did you have something to...
I was going to conclude, like, yeah, I think it's interesting. You, like, I don't want to use the word, like, dealing with, because it's, but you, like, living with and having, like, experiencing life with multiple, like, chronic illnesses, with multiple, like, disabilities. I don't know if concussions are considered a disability illness, like, what they... I know they're a disability, but I was like... I also kept the like point of this thing vague because I'm like, yeah, it's the Illest podcast, but like disabilities, illnesses, mental health, like all of these things are kind of under the same bubble. And I'm not a wordsmith, which is bad because the job I'm trying to do is comedian, and that's all words.
At least talking. Yeah.
Just trying to craft words, but I am not a wordsmith.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, I take your point, and I think that it. That harkens back to a thought that I had when Aydan was talking about how celiacs is not really a very respected thing to talk about. Like a lot of people just sort of write it off. So many people will like bundle celiacs and gluten intolerance into the same category.
Gluten intolerance, celiacs, Crohn's,
right?
Being on a diet.
You just got some fucked up weird gut issue.
Like, oh my gosh, when is this one going to be over?
And
like,
celiac specifically, I feel like gets downgraded.
Yeah.
People talk about like,
because
you just
fad.
can't eat wheat or whatever.
It happened to be an illness that also became a fad.
Fucking
because celiac disease. Okay, here's my soapbox. Celiac disease. Well, it's a disease because that's what it's called.
It's got that D word.
Yeah, exactly. But also, our bodies, especially the type of wheat that we have now, the way it's processed and stuff, our bodies don't like wheat in general. Nobody's body really likes it, especially how modified it is now. Yeah. So everyone inevitably feels better if they go off of wheat fully and bread fully. You will, like, I had a doctor tell me that, like, of course it's a fad. You stop eating bread for 30 days, you're going to feel great.
It is.
You know? And so then it became a fad, and then all of the people who actually had celiac disease or any kind of disease that is worsened, affected, or triggered by wheat just automatically got lumped into those people.
Right, now you're all just complaining.
Now you're all just complaining.
And so it's the problem is that we can't think or believe two things at one time. That's a theme that I'm seeing very prevalently right now. And so that's sort of what it reminds me of, is like, my ulcerative proctitis sucks. It's the thing that I'm dealing with day to day because I'm sort of in this place where I'm either trying to get it into remission or find out the combination of pills I've got to take to just be a human being every day. And so that's the thing that's like front and center on my plate. But my severe head injury makes it harder for me to remember to take my pills, even with reminders on my phone. My severe head injury makes the depression, which is a very common side effect of severe head injuries. The depression will make the impetus to take care of myself, to take the pills, or to not drink a beer, or to make sure that I'm exercising X amount of times a week, and to do the things that I know are good for me. That it's like yoga. It's great for you, but it's hard to do, so you don't want to do it.
Totally.
You know, the fact that I have a relatively permanent short-term memory loss. I have a hard time committing things to my short-term memory due directly to the severe head injury. And I mean, like, that's where the concussion is like the thing that actually changed my life, because that's the one day, the experience. If you have a concussion, you probably had one of couple types of experiences. You probably either felt fuzzy, like took a hit to the head, and then you feel a little fuzzy, and maybe you kind of forget what day of the week it is for a couple weeks, and you kind of like slowly get back on the horse, and you kind of get back up to speed. And that is sort of like, that is the general sort of air quotes experience with concussions. What those are mild concussions.
Gotcha.
I'm
like what a lot of people have experienced if they play sports, or if they, like you said, fall off a bike normally.
And now, like, if you get 20 mild concussions, you get what's called CTE, and that's when you have repetitive traumatic brain injuries to over and over again. That's why a footballer doesn't have to be a defensive lineman to get CTE. They can
had a lot of multiple minor concussions.
Yes, or soldiers who are a part of a artillery battery. They'll get CTE from the shockwave, from the shells being blasted out of that giant gun 1,000 times in a year or whatever.
Yeah.
So those are sort of like, CTE is the one that we're talking about a lot right now in sports. That's anytime you're talking about sports injuries, that is a collection of concussions of any level of severity. That's CTE.
Gotcha.
One regular old concussion, most people will bounce back from, especially if they're young. They'll sort of get up and keep going, usually after a couple of weeks. By the way, if you've ever had a concussion, do not rush yourself. If you backslide at all, go back to your previous point of care and work back up. Do not push past a point that you think you can because you're tough enough.
Don't push yourself if you have a concussion.
It's the worst thing you can do.
Totally.
So then when you take...
Which is, I feel like that's just good advice for if you
Oh my
like,
God.
just stop pushing yourself.
Which is one of the hardest pieces of advice to take, because
God,
there was a part of me, like a very serious part of me, that like would joke but also like felt internally that, hey, so I haven't done anything for over a year, so I mean, why should I need sleep now? I've been doing nothing but sleeping.
Yeah,
like
and
I've got all that laziness saved up for me to just go and like hit life and never stop going forward. And that's also
regardless of chronic illness or anything like that, that's just not how the body works.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That's just not how your body works before anything is wrong with it.
I mean, I will say that from the one time that I, as a massage therapist, that I would ever suggest that you push yourself is with a sort of sore muscle. That's when you should push yourself.
Like you're
Or
like,
after
that's
you-
uncomfortable.
if you-
Okay, yeah,
and
stretch.
like we've learned that when you sprain your ankle, you shouldn't ice it for 7 weeks. You should walk on it as soon as you can. So there are times in your health where pushing yourself can be a good thing. They're usually in relation to your muscles,
And it's
They're-
significantly less than everybody thinks.
Yes.
Because that is literally a thought process that everyone consciously or subconsciously subscribes to and promotes, is that you just have to push yourself. If you try harder, it will change. And that is rarely true, particularly with chronic illness. It is
Absolutely.
like, pushing yourself is just going to make it worse.
And so I would say that the concussion is the exemplification of that, because it is the definition. If you try and push yourself with that thing, you're not going to maybe backslide. You will backslide.
Yeah.
So the severe concussion means this. I woke up as a different person the day after my accident.
Wow. Never thought of it like that. That's intense.
I can remember who Jeff was before the concussion. I can remember who he was after. For instance, hey, Key,
hey, Jeff.
you ever notice how near the end of our LARPing years, I was much more angry all the time?
I know. We did not get along even a little bit.
At all.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
not
no.
at all.
We I'd consider you like definitely a friend now, but there was a while where we never stated it to each other, but we both were
Things were
at
not
each
good.
other's
Yeah.
throats because you were wrong all the time and I'm smarter and have better ideas
Right.
and
I mean,
better methods to implement them.
And I would like to apologize for being so wrong. For so
Yes,
many
yes.
years.
Clearly, that's the only thing.
Yeah.
It had nothing to do with my own ego
Right.
as a late.
No. Young 20-year-olds have no such thing as
They
ego.
are, peaking when it comes to intelligence. Two things I want to point out. One, I don't think we should just casually glaze over the fact that you just talked about LARPing. I think that should be something we should mention.
That's not an illness. It's just a bad life choice.
Depends on your perspective.
Wow. Shade.
Also, the other actual thing I wanted to talk about was how uncommon of a theory and just a principle that a lot of people don't realize or understand, or is just even brought up, is that when you get a permanent illness of any kind, a chronic illness of any kind, or something that permanently changes your mental state, your physical state, anything, that it is not just like I am this person and now I am sick. It is I was this person and now I am not. I am a different person.
Yeah.
And I've talked often about how once I got my diagnosis as HIV positive, that it wasn't just at first I was like, oh, now I'm just HIV positive. I'm the same person, but now I literally went through a full mourning process of that person because I was no longer that person.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the things that you deal with is PTSD.
Yes.
So I would like to segue the conversation into the similarities of brain scans between people with PTSD and people with severe head injuries.
I was actually going to ask you about that.
Yeah.
That was something I was thinking.
So just to finish the thing that I was saying, and that I absolutely want to get, because that is an amazing fact, and I have a thought that I've been thinking about for years as a result of my concussion related to that. I used to be a more patient person. I used to have a much longer fuse on my temper. My temper didn't burn as hot. I was able to think about something for a lot longer and sort of mull it over and look at it from different angles. My memory has never been great, but it got much, much worse. And then there were the physical aspects. I had debilitating back pain as a result of my concussion for about 3 or 4 months. Very related symptom that rarely gets talked about or brought up. I had really fucked up gut issues that I now believe is my ulcerative proctitis being thrown through the loop by all of the stress that was induced by the concussion.
Absolutely.
Because GI issues are almost always made worse by stress, and there ain't much more stressful than a giant head injury.
They are always made worse by stress.
Yeah.
Like 100% of the time, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I'm not a doctor, but I
My
know
doctor
lots of
said
things.
they are. My GI doctor
100%
said
of the
they are.
time,
Yeah.
your stress will absolutely affect your
He said
gut
it's
health.
he said it's to the point that other specialist doctors talk to him about his patients and think that his patients are crazy because there's so much correlationary evidence between your stress levels and the health of your gut when you have a gut issue that other doctors look at it, and Western medicine still hasn't accepted that emotions have something to do with our health.
A common unknown thing about celiacs is that it is so affected by stress that if you are under stress, can actually manifest symptoms of being exposed to gluten, even if you haven't been exposed.
Fascinating. I did not
So
know that. That's
you
really
can-
interesting.
Yeah. So it really, I mean, they are not just connected; they are directly connected.
The
You know.
one thing I kind of want to like go back on a lot of that, like you feeling like a different person, a lot of the effects of your concussion. I mean, I did make the joke about how you were always wrong, but no, like you always were and still are a very brilliant person, but having this concussion kind of. It's a weird thing because lots of people think of intelligence as more of a objective thing. There are smart people, there are dumb people, however you consider it. But it's interesting, and I'm trying to phrase this in a way where I'm not like accidentally insulting you.
You won't hurt
but
my
like,
feelings.
You got dumber, is what he's trying to say.
no, like there.
Is that what you're trying to say? Am I understanding this correctly?
Yes.
You went from really smart
But
to like.
in specific-
no one's
Stupid is
mentioned
as
it,
stupid
but yeah.
goes.
Well, no, like things like your ability to process things like anger well and have that time of reflection, things like your memory, things like other very specific aspects. And it's kind of one, it must be very hard having like the knowledge of how your brain was before. That must be incredibly difficult because that's something that I had to process when I had all those drugs going
That
through me.
is real life
And
right
also the conflict of being someone who has a very good brain that doesn't work sometimes.
Oh boy.
Yeah, like
and actually you reminded me of other symptoms that I had that I forgot about. So
That's funny.
the fun, things we say now.
That wasn't even a joke. That's just real.
Which was a good movie on Netflix, by the way. The Wine Country, I assume you're referencing.
That's exactly what I.
Yeah,
we
it's a
just
good
watched
movie.
It today.
It's
I laughed out loud the whole time. Watch it. It's really funny.
What?
Wine Country. It's on Netflix. It's got Amy Poehler and literally everybody that she's ever acted with.
Oh,
It's
Yes,
just
it's
good.
Okay, I will.
yeah,
Really
it's
good.
it's also a weirdly like charming thing that kind of doesn't go with like lots of how filmmaking feels like it should be.
Yes.
It just feels very like natural and just like you're part of these people's lives.
Dude, it's like a movie from the 70s or 80s where we just watch relationships develop and then the movie kind of ends. But it ends well.
Yeah,
Like it doesn't just like, like that's not, you're left with feeling like it actually resolved itself. But they don't do a big plot. Like there's no, gang mystery or whatever.
Well, welcome to the Illest podcast, the first Amy Poehler appreciation podcast about chronic illness.
Also,
She's amazing.
80s,
She's
also
amazing, and I have cancer.
80s movies review as well. We're doing, about that. Yeah, she's amazing, and I have cancer.
So it is. So there are studies about how people who are able to observe how their brain functioned before a concussion versus after usually walk away with much worse depression than those who can't. Which is to say, if you're a dumb jock who just keeps getting smacked on the football field, you go, "Oh no, I'm kind of thinking a little bit slow, coach," and then you shake it off because you don't have the prescience, you don't have the sort of like literal presence of mind and ability to observe yourself.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to say that I'm like a super smart cat. I just have always been able to observe myself to a certain degree.
Yeah.
So those times when I was losing my temper and being angry, I would nearly always end up going home and being pissed at myself for being pissed. Because it was like anger turned in, it was like Hulk syndrome. It's like anger was the only thing that there was. It was the reaction to my problems. And it's because my concussion happened up in my emotional center. My concussion happened in the frontal lobe, in your decision-making center, where when you get to consciously decide what you're going to think about something, it goes to your frontal lobe. Thank you, Liz Hedlund. You're the smartest person in the world.
I was like,
you.
I know this is
all my
Not
fiance.
that I don't doubt that you are intelligent enough to know this. I knew that came from
She's
Liz.
so much smarter than I am. It's disturbing. But so my injury happened there. And so my ability to control my emotional response was thrown out the window. And so because of the particular patch of neurons that got shaken around in my head, anger became the way that I responded to things. And it was so frustrating. It was just like frustrating to the point of tears all the time. I would just get so pissed because I knew in the moment that I would be acting in a way that I would never have acted in the past.
We're like 5
Yeah,
minutes away
we're
from
getting
having to
into
end.
about to
we have
10 hour line. But
we have to wrap it up here. But I can't tell you how I obviously can't relate to your situation, but the principle that you're talking about, I can relate to so much. If you get a chance, looking up the comparisons of people's brain before like PTSD and then after PTSD.
Yes.
And it's not just your brain chemistry. Your brain is different.
Yeah, so
It's
can I speak
absolutely
on that
different.
very quickly?
Yes, but less than 5 minutes.
Yes,
I'm just
yes,
kidding.
Go.
Have emphasis on quickly.
The scans between people who have had concussions and people who have had PTSD, you can't tell who's had a concussion and who's had PTSD.
I was actually wondering about that. I
can't.
was wondering if I was going to ask you about that.
So what happens is the concussion is the manual way in which your neurons get disconnected and reconnected in other places.
So it's like
you
a
do
very
it with actual physical
It's
trauma.
a very similar injury. But
if you can't develop your
different.
PTSD naturally, store-bought is fine.
Fucking bingo.
Yeah,
Just go
store-bought is
grab a hammer. You know? And so then PTSD, what happens is something so traumatic
generic,
happens that your brain, I'm nowhere near smart enough to understand how, but neurons disconnect from the pathways they were on and reconnect to other pathways exactly like with a concussion. So I don't know the process in PTSD that makes it happen, but it is
the same
almost
thing.
identical.
Which is that is incredibly fascinating to me and so honestly validating.
Yeah.
Because so many people do not validate health issues unless there's some kind of physical attachment to it.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yes.
like it's you don't if you can't see it, it's not real unless there's some kind of outward or tangible relation to it.
Yeah, you don't look sick.
You don't look sick.
don't look sick, dude.
Which is
You're up and you're working.
the resource that I mentioned last time was the youdon'tlook.sick.com.
Thank you for the spoons thing. That needs all the airtime in the world. Everyone should
Seriously.
understand the spoon theory.
Since we're wrapping up, first, is there anything else that you would like to talk about your plethora of experiences? Any kind of
Like a thought you would like to leave to
just
people with.
and then we'll get to resources after that. Sorry, I know that you don't need to have a thesis statement for disability.
If
but
I
I just
had to leave you with anything, no, we don't want that.
Okay, no, I got one for sure. So I stumbled upon the doctor in an ER room in Chico who put together my anecdotal medical history and said, I think you have an autoimmune disease. And if it weren't for that individual, I would still think that I was just a guy with a bad gut. So I guess what I'm trying to say is don't gaslight yourself, because I just thought that I had a weird bad gut for 20 years.
Yes.
So go to a fucking doctor and demand service and learn your patient's rights and learn what you can demand of your doctor. Learn when your doctor's allowed to say no. Learn what you're allowed to say when your doctor says no. Learn the value of these words. I would like you to make a note or to put into my chart right now while I'm standing here that you refused my medical request.
Yes.
That is an incredibly powerful
That is
statement.
a very powerful thing, yeah.
That is like asking for an officer's badge number because you're making them annotate the fact that they disagree with you, and
so-
that will make a doctor check themselves.
Absolutely. And
That's
and
what I got to say.
Yeah, that is so powerful and so not well known.
Fucking A. I mean, I know a lot about medical service because I've just the household I've grown up in. I just learned that shit from my older brother. So it's like it is not well known. You know?
Nope, it
And
is
I know
not.
when I can push my doctor around.
I just now go into the ER, and every time that I have anything, I'm like, by the way, point number 1, I have cancer. So
It's like the medical.
I have cancer.
It's like the medical version of that meme where the guy is like, being gay in an office has its advantages, and he just pushes
Move,
people,
I'm gay.
Move, I'm gay, and uses a copy machine. That's kind of how I feel like it is, Whoosh, I have cancer. Do what I tell you.
And lastly, one thing that we ask each other, and one thing that I want to know from you is anyone who who's had a concussion, who's had procticis, the word that I still have yet to say out loud correct.
Ulcerative proctitis.
Yeah.
500, Alex.
I'll just edit that over my voice to make it sound like.
Turn with its head. Ulcerative proctitis.
So, or a concussion, or anything, is there any any resources, one that they should look out for, or someone who might be listening who is more able-bodied, who wants to go and help in whatever ways they can? If there's any kind of resources that you might want to go and just put out into the world before we wrap things up.
Sure. So if you're local here in Humboldt County and you have a concussion, if you've ever had a concussion ever, and you would like to just check it out and learn more about it and or get help, you can go to Making Headway. I don't know if they have a website. I went to them originally. I haven't been to them in years.
Making Headway is a local.
Making Headway's local. I think
Oh,
they're in
okay,
Eureka
okay.
or so, they might have moved since, but they're local. So if you're in
I've heard
Humboldt
of it
County,
before. I didn't know it was local.
They're good. They're totally free. It's a free resource. If you have
that's awesome.
head injuries, check them out for sure. I also just checked out just the plain old CDC.gov website has actually been updated to have a lot of medically relevant information about concussions, which I'll tell you shouldn't be a surprising fact, but is.
Yeah.
So CDC.gov is actually pretty good just for an information resource on what I know about concussions. As for ulcerative proctitis, there's a website that I had it written down and left it at home. It's something to the effect of nikkd.com. It's really
Children,
niche.
allow your parents to
Right.
look that one up first.
So what I'll tell you what I did, I Googled it. I Googled ulcerative proctitis resources because I remembered that my doctor mentioned it, and it's one of the top results, and the website is the only one that's a big old amalgamation of letters.
Okay.
All the other ones are going to be like Doctors of America or whatever. This
Yeah.
it's something like NIKTT or something. So those have good information. I don't know of any foundations or anything like that.
All right. Well, that's really good. Thank you so much, Jeff, for coming in, being our very first guest.
Thank
so that's
you.
exciting.
Yeah.
I mean, nothing starts off a podcast like talking about all of the problems that you can shit with.
Yeah,
Yeah.
nothing.
Yeah, let's talk about
all
poop
of the,
more.
Yeah, I mean, the standard has been set.
Yeah.
The standard has
So
been
far,
set.
so
High
far,
bar.
all three of us have poop-based complications. So now we know exactly our niche.
Listen,
going
my
further.
personality is not the only thing that's shitty.
Hey!
Okay. 3-1,
Also,
I win.
Poop-based problems.
Poop.
Is that what you said?
Yeah. So that's
New band name. I'm calling
poop.
that.
Poop-based
Oh
problem.
Yes, poop-based
We are poop-based problems. Good night.
Thank you for being here. Thank you,
thank
everyone
you. Thank you.
online for listening. I know that in the future there will be thousands of you.
Yes,
all
millions possibly, yeah.
all supporting us. If you do want to support us, please email editor@savagehenrymagazine.com.
Yeah,
You can
huge-
end up going and getting some ad space, and we'll talk about your business. If you're not one of the businesses we've already
We've
alienated.
already,
And if so,
destroyed,
you know
yeah.
what? I'll step back. I'll try to rectify that. Also, if you're not a business, there is a Patreon for Savage Henry Magazine. There's a lot of really fun perks, and we're going to be looking at adding more in the future. And if nothing else, just come in to Savage Henry's Comedy
Yeah.
Club. There's live events 7 nights a week, starting at 9 p.m.
Hell yeah.
And if you're not local, don't want to end up giving us money, just send out a tweet talking about
Yeah,
us. Go
just
share
support
us.
it,
Just
yeah.
make us famous.
Yeah,
Make it
exactly.
viral.
I want to,
you guys.
a huge shout out to
No,
Savage Henry.
uh,
I really appreciate all the opportunity and everything that they do
Yeah.
and letting us do this. It's really amazing.
Well, I mean, Aydan's already viral. That's the problem.
Right.
So
Yeah, I'm so. Yeah,
Listen,
that's where
I can
that's
listen,
where I'm gonna leave things.